Hello YouTube, I am Bosscinerator, and since this will be my first video, I felt that it would be the best time to introduce myself, let everyone know what this channel is all about, and what you can expect from me in the future. First of all, this channel is going to be dedicated to the thing that most video gamers will take away from their playthroughs. The one thing that's either going to make a game a bigger hit, or a worse flop. The thing that combines great game story, gameplay, and uniqueness into a glorious experience, or a blob of wallpaper paste. This channel is going to be dedicated to the boss fight. Those great tests of what we've learned, the skills that we've been honing this entire time, fighting through waves of faceless minions, solving puzzles, and saving the world. Every challenge, every experience is going to be put to the test in this dynamic arena with its own rules, music, and mechanics entirely distinct from the rest of the game, which grabs you by the collar and throws you around like a rag doll before you take it by the horns and show it who's the boss. However, to be totally clear, here is a description of this channel. Reviewing video games through boss fights. From the Lieutenant of the First Castle to the Dark Lord right at the end of the game, each boss fight is unique in its own way. The videos that will be posted to this channel are something that I like to call the Let's Beat video, which will be the footage of the boss fight itself, and afterwards there will be a review of what I thought of that boss fight, and then finally, a score. The Let's Beat video maximum score will be out of 30 in 3 categories: gameplay, story, and how much fun I personally had fighting the boss. The scores will be represented by, well, what else besides Triforces? That great golden symbol that tells the world that you are a video gamer. And finally, whenever I do beat a game in its entirety, I'll dedicate a video to a review of the game overall, along with giving the game an overall score in the same categories as the boss fights. Okay, now that the dedication of this channel is established, there are going to be a few guidelines that this channel is going to abide by, to make video creating efficient and ensuring that I have enough content to post more videos. Since this is a boss fight channel, there are going to be a few genres of video games that will either never be discussed here or only on rare occasions. The first genre will be sports games. Madden, Wii Sports, and Mario Tennis are games that revolve around the gameplay with little to no story structure and thus have none or very few boss fights. The next will be party games. We play Fortune Street and Mario Party. Again, they revolve around the gameplay and either don't have story campaigns or have very weak story campaigns to provide boss fights. The last genre that's going to be avoided on this channel, and possibly the most crushing of them all, are going to be the one-on-one fighters. Games such as Tekken, Mortal Kombat, and Soul Calibur, again, I feel personally focuses more on the gameplay rather than the story, and it wasn't included in the game, or the story campaign included is so flimsy that it only has you fight through a string of the available fighters on a tissue-thin campaign. Because of these reasons, this genre is not going to be featured on this channel. However, genres that will feature on this channel often will be the shooters, first and third, RPGs, Western and Japanese, action-adventure, and fantasy games, as these games provide the needed gameplay structured with a story, and with the story comes the boss fights. Now, in order for me to be able to review boss fights, I need to answer the question, what constitutes a boss fight? First, the enemy has to be unique in some way from the rest of the game. It can be a unique name, title, character design, or simply a unique arena where the battle is taking place. For example, the 3 Stalfos boss fight from Ocarina of Time was a boss fight simply due to it being in a unique arena. Second, a distinction has to be made. If the fight is with a group, is it a group or a horde? Because hordes are not boss fights. Hordes are tens to hundreds of normal minions waiting to be slaughtered. For example, the 25 Metal Gear Ray fight from Metal Gear Solid 2 was a group boss fight, while the 1000 Heartless from Kingdom Hearts 2 was a horde and was not a boss fight. Finally, 2 smaller rules to further define this channel. First, this is not a retro gaming channel. The combination of unforgiving difficulty and the little story structure make them incredibly annoying to play, and the few boss fights that are employed in retro games provides little new content. And personally, I don't want to play retro video games. Second, this channel is going to be what some others would call retrospective reviews. This meaning that the games being reviewed are going to be between the first 3D video games up to the final games of the 7th generation, because I don't like retro games, and the increasing corporate culture is making the 8th generation terrible, and personally, it's not worth getting into unless somehow they produce a game I couldn't live without, and be able to want me to invest in a current generation console. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. But that shouldn't discourage you, viewers. Get excited! There are still tons of video games that I haven't even touched yet. Dead Space, Mass Effect, Resident Evil, Castlevania, Half-Life, Final Fantasy. These older video games are going to be reviewed in a modern perspective to put a new spin on the games of yore. Also, while these Let's Beat videos will be the focus of this channel, when I start digging into the video gaming cornucopia and begin to experience all those boss fights, I will later start posting top 10 videos and maybe some yearly reflection videos, along with some rant videos when an issue pisses me off enough to make a video about it. So there's definitely more to watch out for from this channel. Now some of you watching right now might be wondering, why did he select Super Mario 64 as the video game that is providing his footage for his introductory video? To answer that question, first of all, Super Mario 64 is from that stable of video games from the Nintendo 64 period that everyone who had that console when they were kids put on its own pedestal and called it one of the best games of all time. You could argue that this reason is because of nostalgia blinding people to how truthfully mediocre it is when compared to modern games, but the truth of the matter is that Super Mario 64 was incredibly influential in the introductory years of 3D video gaming, providing a great example for how 3D video games are to progress into the future. This game also happens to be one of my favorites of all time, because it provided a unique map design, unique challenges, and one of the best gameplay experiences I've ever had. Now, since we are getting close to the summit of the mountain, this would be a perfect time to use a real example to show off the layout of a Let's Beat video. First will be the actual footage, starting with a versus screen in order to show the combatants in the fight. And I'll usually include a subtitle for the boss if it hasn't already been given one.
Let's go! Okie dokie.
And after the fight, I will give my thoughts about the fight. King Bob-omb, being the first boss for a video game, has to be able to give a good first impression of things to come for the player. For a child, which is the target audience for this video game, The fact that this boss itself provided its own weakness in the text block, along with the incredibly slow attack speed of this boss, and the fact that the only damage he could cause to a player was if he was lucky enough to throw you off the mountain, and you would take falling damage. Otherwise, the attack does nothing, and it's just a momentary annoyance. But at the end of the fight, the child would have been able to glean some form of achievement from this, as it was probably their very first video game. However, the nostalgia-blinded audience of this game are now in their 20s, and this boss's threatening status is incredibly downgraded to lolcat level. And it's frankly insulting to their gaming ability. Finally, King Bob-omb's incredibly slow speed and requiring contact to attack with an attack that is only threatening if you are caught at the edge, along with the fact that the only people threatened by it are people who can't read due to the fact he literally tells the enemy his weakness before the fight. King of the Bombs as the King of the Flops. This fight is the antithesis of the first Colossus battle from Shadow of the Colossus, which set up the game perfectly and is one of the best examples of how to design a first boss. And it leaves me with giving it this score. Gameplay. Being functional and incredibly easy, I'll give it 2 2/3 Triforces. Story. He's a figurehead, and he barely has a background. 1 1/3 Triforces. Fun. With no concept of danger, there's no achievement, and thus no fun. 1 Triforce. Finally, King Bob-omb. King of the Explosives gets a final score of 5 out of 30. The first one running to the battlefield tripped on its own feet and turned into a huge dud. Unexplosive, uneventful, and disappointing. To conclude this video, I leave the viewers with this final message. Victory for the gamers! Have a nice day.